this section, we're just learning some key terms in statistics. The first term is population. Population tends to be the thing that we are actually interested in studying. Okay, this is the group of people or things that we want to know about. Okay. There is a problem with studying a population, though. Often it is difficult in practice to actually study a population. Maybe it's too big. For example, if we want to know something about every person in the United States of America, about the whole population of people in the United States of America, there's over 300 million people in the United States. That's a lot of people to talk to and find out about. Okay? Or maybe we are studying a manufacturing line. Okay, maybe we want to know more about the ice cream that comes off a manufacturing line. And in order to test the ice cream, we have to taste it. We don't want to taste every single ice cream. People don't like it when you taste their ice cream. Tasting the ice cream destroys the product, right? So we don't want to test the entire population. A lot of times, most of the time, we want to test a smaller group of the population. We call this a sample. Okay? A sample is a subset of a population. And this allows us, instead of having to look at the whole population, we look at a smaller group. And often that smaller group can tell us quite a bit about that population if we choose that sample well. Okay, so let's look at an example. Say these circles are our population. Okay, so here's our population. Now, for whatever reason, we don't want to survey the whole population. Okay, so instead, we're going to gather a smaller sample. So for our sample, we're only going to choose a few of these. Maybe we choose this circle, and maybe we choose this circle, and maybe this circle. Okay, and these become our sample. This is the group we actually study. Okay, that's the difference between a population and a sample. Population is the full group. Sample is the subset. It's the smaller group that we actually end up studying so that we can learn more about the population. Okay. Now, we want to summarize the data we get from population. We want to summarize the data we get from a sample. So we want to know about the population. A lot of times we want to know about a parameter. A parameter is a number that summarizes the data in a population. Okay? Parameter is a number that summarizes data in a population. So some examples. The mean or the average of a collection of data would be a parameter. If we averaged all the data in a population, that would be a parameter for the population. It summarizes the data. Another example is a proportion. A proportion is a fraction or a percent. So for example, maybe we want to know how many people like pizza in the USA. Okay, that fraction or percent is a proportion. That's what it's called. It's the proportion of people in the USA who like pizza. In the previous example from the previous video, it was 90%. That's the proportion. Okay? So both of these are different kinds of parameters. Okay? But again, we often can't measure the population directly, so it's hard for us to find the population parameter. Okay, so instead we use our sample. When we find the same value in a sample, we call it a statistic. A number that summarizes data in a sample. And estimates a parameter. So again, mean, proportion, these would be, if I found this information for a sample, if I found the mean of a sample or the proportion in a sample, those would be statistics. Notice we're doing the same thing for population, we're doing the same thing for a sample, but we call them different names. If we find the mean of a population, we call it a parameter. If we find the mean for a sample, we call it a statistic. It's important that we distinguish between when we're talking about a population and when we're talking about a sample. So we give them different names. You'll see this theme repeated as we go on through the course and actually learn mathematically how to find these things. We give, we're going to call these different things, and we're going to be very careful to distinguish when we're talking about a population and when we're talking about a sample. Okay? One way to remember which one's talking about a population, which one talks about a sample, is the letter in front. Okay? Parameter starts with a P. Parameter deals with a population. This is a population parameter. Okay? Statistic starts with the letter S. So this is a sample statistic. The letter in front helps us remember what it describes, whether it's describing a feature in a sample or a feature in a population. Okay? Now, mean and proportion, by the way, aren't the only types of parameters. They're not the only types of statistics, but they're the ones that we are perhaps most familiar with, and they're going to be two that we focus on a lot throughout the course. We will learn about others as we go on. Okay? Okay, so how do we actually find a population parameter or a sample statistic? Well, in order to find these, we need to find information about a variable. A variable is something that everything in the population has. Okay, it's some quality or characteristic. A characteristic, I should say a measurable characteristic, that every member of the population has. It is usually represented by a capital letter. Like capital X or capital Y. Okay? So the variable is the thing we're actually measuring. It's important that every member of the population has this, okay? Or else when we start surveying people, okay, or whatever thing that is the member of the population, whenever we start surveying, they're not going to have the thing that we're trying to study, okay? So every member of the population has to have this. For example, maybe if we're talking about people, maybe we're measuring the height of people in the United States. Okay, or if we go back to the pizza example, maybe we're asking them if they like pizza, yes or no. Okay, everyone has an opinion on that subject, and so that's a variable. Okay, their answers is the data itself. So don't confuse variable with the data. The data is kind of the answer to the variable, and the data can be different for every person. Okay, the data are the values of the members of the population corresponding to the variable. Okay, so the variable is the same for everyone. Now that's what we are. It's kind of like a description of what we are measuring. The data are the actual measurements. So try not to confuse the two. Okay, so for example, X might be the variable, the height of all adult males in the USA. Okay, the data are the actual values for different people. Okay, so maybe it's 5 foot 8 inches, or 6 foot 0 inches, or 5 feet 3 inches. Okay, those would be examples of data. They vary from member to member in the population. The variable is a description of what we're measuring. Okay, and it's something that everybody has. Notice, by the way, it does not have to be a number. Here I've used numbers, and a lot of times in this course we will use numbers, okay, because they are the easiest to work with mathematically. We could just do more with them. But sometimes it's as simple as yes or no. Do you like pizza? Yes or no. Yes would be one data point, possible data value. No would be another possible data value. Okay, so data could be numbers, or it could just be words, answers to a question. Okay, but it's something that everyone's going to be able to answer. Okay, so these are the key terms, and we're going to use these a lot throughout statistics.